Thank you. It's a pleasure to join everybody. It was really exciting to be able to be a part of this session today. We want to actually invite you to join us on Slido, as Yasmin said. Uh, we would love for you to be able to let us know what your favorite fictional character was as a child. And this can be either from TV, from movies, from books. We've included a small graphic there just to give you guys a little bit of throwback to what some of the different fictional characters were that maybe a lot of us grew up with. And I'm going to actually just switch over to our Slido so we can start to see some of the responses already. Some of them I think are going to be very familiar to us. Yes, Mickey Mouse, I'm sure, and Winnie the Pooh are quite popular, so thank you so much. We'll take a few more minutes to let people continue to join. Yeah, there are definitely lots of characters that I think we all remember very fondly, and so this is something that we're going to continue to talk about as we go through our session. But yes, thank you so much, everybody. We'll give you just a couple more minutes. Kim,
seeing a lot of.
Go ahead, Will.
I'm just saying, I'm seeing a lot of Sailor Moon. I'm seeing a lot of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Darkwing Duck is heavily highlighted. We've got a good crowd today.
We've got a nice mix. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay. We'll let a few more folks participate, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to share the full in a few more minutes. But now we wanted to go ahead and go back to our presentation so we can continue to. Oh, apologies for that. Go back here. All right. So now what we wanted to do is we wanted to actually start just by. Sorry, there we go. We wanted to go ahead and start with our agenda so that you have a little bit of an overview of what it is we're going to be talking about. So we wanted to go over our objectives and then talk about the play program and our Importami program. And we did want to leave time at the end for some questions and answers. So feel free to put any questions you might have in the chat, and we'll be happy to answer those at the end of our session. So again, we'll just give folks another couple of seconds and then we can close out that poll. So let's see, yeah, we're at almost 50 people have participated. So these are the results. Thank you so much, everybody, for participating. Yeah, it definitely looks like Hermione and Winnie the Pooh, Mickey Mouse and Kim Possible, along with many others, were very popular. Thank you so much. So now what we wanted to do was tell you a little bit about what we hope that you'll be able to get out of this session. We want to really focus on what play is and why it's necessary, and how to use play effectively in a legal setting. We also want to talk about what are some strategies that we found are particularly helpful in building trust and communicating with children, particularly now that we know many children are using social media more and we are very much still remote. And lastly, we want to talk about why it's important to have specialized and child-centered, age-appropriate resources when we're working with our unaccompanied kids. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pass it over to Will.
All right. Thank you, Amari. So hi, everyone. I'm Will Clements. I'm the case manager for the Unaccompanied Children Program at the International Rescue Committee here in Dallas, Texas. And today I'm going to be talking to you about the IRC Play Program. So just, I guess to start us off, why start a play program? It sounds like an unusual thing for a legal service provider to have, but I think we've had a lot of great success with it. So a little bit of background on our work. We partner with tender age border shelters in North Texas and interview several hundred children each year about their lives, about their journeys to the United States. And in our work with these kids, we had a lot of issues that I'm sure a lot of you have faced in working with young children. These included children refusing to talk to us. Children were often reliving traumatic events while talking to us. There's also an inherent power imbalance that happens when an adult is talking to a kid, or a professional like a lawyer is speaking with a child, that makes them uncomfortable and often unwilling to share information. And we also found that there's a fair amount of burnout in staff. Talking to children about difficult subjects like these is incredibly difficult for everyone involved, including the facilitator. In June 2021, we started the IRC Play program. The basic idea being that we could improve this process for both legal service providers and for the children that we are working with by integrating play therapy techniques, and play theory into our day-to-day work. So we built this program by cooperating with mental health experts, play experts, and even some Walt Disney Muppeteers who trained IRC staff on how to use puppets when working with children at the border shelter. But we have fully integrated play therapy techniques and play theory into our day-to-day work. Now, play-centric techniques are our default method of interviewing young children in border shelters. We are working on expanding access to play resources and training to other IRC offices. And we're working on documenting and researching the success of these techniques to see how exactly we can improve upon and how exactly they impact our work. So let's talk about how exactly this has changed our work. First and foremost, it improves our ability to gather information. So for instance, children who have trouble talking to me, Will Clements, an adult, might have an easy time talking to Javi, my pig puppet, or Oscar, our turtle puppet, or children who have a hard time expressing themselves verbally or in a linear method, which children often have trouble doing, can express themselves through art or through symbolic play. It really has eased our ability to communicate with young children. But also it allows us to level the power imbalance between us and the child that creates a sense of discomfort or distrust. So there is a power imbalance between Will Clements, the social worker, and a child, but not between the puppet and the child, or not in a space of play, which is a judgment-free space. But more than this, more than improving our ability to communicate effectively with clients and gather information, play better fulfills our obligations to our clients. So we're going to get a bit more into the science of this later on in the presentation, but play is a critical part of the well-being of children, particularly amongst play-deprived populations like refugee and unaccompanied minors. Play also allows children to become more than their trauma. I feel like if we set the tone with our kids during our sessions with them, we only talk about their worst experiences and the worst days of their lives, we're setting a bad tone for the relationship going forward. If we set up a relationship as one that engages in play, allows children to choose agency, set boundaries, ask questions, we're setting up a much better relationship with them. I can tell you that it is night and day, kind of for me, using traditional interview techniques versus using play techniques in terms of my relationships with the kids I'm working with. So, bit of fun. Let's learn, how exactly did you play as a child? We've got some questions up. Did you like to use sports, yo-yos, or scooters, any kind of athletic play? Did you like making sandcastles, digging or creating towns, coloring, painting, using Play-Doh? Did you like playing with action figures and dolls like Barbies, Bratz, or Playmobil? So we're all going to get in the headspace of play here and think about how exactly we as individuals played when we were kids, and maybe that can help inform us as to how children think about play, or how we can create spaces of play for the children that we work with. All right. I guess while people are filling that in, I will say that for me, I spent a large part of my childhood in rural Maine. So outdoor exploration was a big part of how I played growing up.
And I know for me, I loved going to the beach. So making sandcastles is something that I love to do. So absolutely. All right. We've got about, let's see, 50 or so. We can go ahead and let a few more people participate. Let's go ahead and.
Right. Oh, wow.
Okay.
A lot of playing with action figures, dolls, a lot of coloring and art. Still love making Lego buildings. Amazing. Sports and yo-yos. Wow.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. So a lot of folks interested in character play, working with characters, creating stories with action figures and dolls. That's great. A lot of artistic play, so playing with art. So I don't want my inner child to go. Well, actually, that's a great segue into our next question, which is, what do you enjoy doing as an adult? Do you like going to live music or theater performances, trying new foods, tinkering with mechanical objects
Should
or
we
vehicles?
throw away the rest of the vegetables, or you want to eat it?
Oh, I think someone has their mic on. But do you like tinkering with mechanical objects or vehicles? I'm going to include the Lego sets in that. Visiting museums, reading or watching movies, or adventuring and traveling, getting outdoors and seeing things. All right. So for me, I will say that like I did grow up with a kind of a high amount of exploration play, all of the above. So that very much is still a part of who I am. And I still kind of am an active hiker on the weekends. I love going to the outdoors. Amari, do you still build sandcastles?
I was going to say, I still love going to the beach, but probably not as much sandcastles. But I did that a lot with my niece and nephew when they were growing up,
Yeah.
for sure. Yes, yes. Definitely a fun thing to be able to do with the kids, especially here in Texas where it's quite hot right now. So it's nice to be able to go outside and be by the water. But yeah, I think similarly, we have I really do enjoy, although I'm not particularly artistic, I do love being able to go to concerts and listen to music. So I think it also shows how we continue to evolve the different things that make us happy and bring us
Yeah.
joy as adults. Okay, so let's go ahead and show some results.
All right, adventure and travel being the number one, reading or watching movies, attending musical events. All right. So very interesting, adventure and travel being one. I think that's definitely something that we didn't have the option to as kids, right? Because we were often kind of following what adults wanted when it came to travel. But certainly makes sense post-pandemic. But reading or watching movies, hiking or outdoor. I'm curious, does anybody have kind of, I mean, what we hope to show by this is that kind of that inner child, that part of us that likes play never goes away. It is deeply ingrained in who we are. And as part of our day-to-day lives. Is there anybody who has a system of play now that they like to use that is different than what they did as a kid, or something the same? Anybody want to talk about how play has changed for them? Legos are still a primary part of my life. Amazing. Yeah. Legos are such a fantastic thing to do.
They really are. All right, excellent. So now we want to go ahead and we want to go to our next section. Go ahead, Will.
All right. So hopefully now we're in a little bit of a creative space, thinking about ourselves as players, how exactly play has impacted our lives. So we're going to go a little bit into the weeds with how play theory works. What academically is play? All right. So we're going to start off with why play is meaningful. So as we've just covered, play is an essential part of who we are. It is something that always sticks with us. It is something that we find across cultures, across ages, and across species. Every single mammal plays and has some form of play. We even find play found across the animal kingdom. I've included one of my favorite photos ever, which is from a 2001 Antarctic expedition, or Arctic, not Antarctic, where a team of sled dogs met a polar bear family. And usually that's a scary thing, right? Meeting a gigantic predator like a polar bear. But instead of kind of having a hostile interaction, what happened was the polar bears flopped over, like what you can see there, and communicated, this is a safe space, we can play. And the sled dogs and the polar bears played for about 2 hours. So this is something that communicates this is a safe space. It's a critical part of who we are. And there are a ton of benefits associated with play early on to later life benefits. So play is key to social development and self-regulation. It allows us to function socially and understand our role as an individual. And play during early childhood has been linked with later academic success, later performative ability, and confidence. And something that's particularly relevant to us as legal service providers working with asylum-seeking children is play helps children process difficult information in a safe way. Play is often a way for children to engage with difficult subjects or things that are difficult to talk about. For instance, I think jungle gyms, for instance, anything that involves climbing is a healthy way for a child to engage with a fear of falling or a fear of danger. Play helps children process this information in a safe space. So Dr. Stuart Brown he literally wrote the book on play. It is called Play. It is a fantastic read. I highly recommend it. But he broke play down into 5 essential components that we can use to basically think about how we can use this or what components are necessary to create a space of play as a legal service provider. So first, play is apparently purposeless. Nobody can, there's not a tangible goal for play, a play session. Play is voluntary. Nobody can force play to happen. Play is inherently appealing. There's something innate about it. Nobody has to tell you like, hey, this is fun for you to understand that something is fun, right? There is a judgment-free space, a place to challenge rules and regulations and power imbalances, which is particularly helpful to us. And play has improvisational potential. It allows children to be creators, make their own stories, make choices. Something that I really enjoy about incorporating play into this is that into my work is that it gives children a fair amount of agency that otherwise they wouldn't have. With the standard interview technique of just going through basic questions, children don't have a lot of agency in what's happening other than just respond. But in a space of play, they can ask questions, they can take it to silly places. It really gives children a lot of agency once you start incorporating play. And finally, and probably most importantly, there's a continuation desire. It's something that children want to come back to. And that's helpful for us. If we're able to incorporate play successfully, they want to come back to us. They have a continuation desire for working with us. All right. So we've talked about why play is important and what play is. Let's talk about what exactly happens when someone is deprived of play at a young age. There are a lot of books and studies to kind of show the long-term negative impacts of play deprivation when someone is deprived of play. Kevin Carroll wrote a book called Rules of the Red Rubber Ball, which goes into kind of the long-term psychological effects of play deprivation, largely based on his own experiences as a play-deprived youth. But there are a wide range of negative impacts from play deprivation. These include poor cognitive development, underdeveloped social skills, a slow development of the prefrontal lateral cortex, a lack of creativity, issues regarding socialization and self-regulation. How we behave with others is largely impacted by the way we play with others, and increased rates of mental illness later on in life. So I think when we talk about play, we often talk about it in a trivial way, right? Because it is literally fun and games. But it is a serious issue. It really impacts who we are and where we go later in life. When I have heard folks as legal service providers, as other kind of service providers working with children, when they talk about using play, it's often kind of for lack of a better term, I'm going to call it the hide the cheese method. Like when you need to give a dog medicine, you hide it in the cheese. So I need to have a difficult conversation with the child, so I'm going to do some drawing with them beforehand. It's not something that kind of it's not something that's just a bit of added fun. It really needs to be a critical part of the services that we provide. Like it is essential for the well-being of children. And if we're advocating for the best interests of children, play needs to be a part of that. All right. So how can we use play as a legal service provider? What are some techniques that we can use? So we're going to run through several types of play that we have used as a legal service provider that have helped us work with young children. So first is art and creative play. This was far and away the most popular result on our survey that we sent out earlier, but it's drawing, painting, anything where the child is creating an object. And I highly recommend, especially working with young children, doing art and creative play during an intake session, during an interview. Not only does it communicate a space of play, so this is a safe, judgment-free space, but children who are engaged with art are often engaging a different part of their brain entirely and might find it easier to communicate or tell their stories when creating art. Next is character play. So these are role-playing games. They can establish trust, say that we can explore risk and safety in a safe space. My favorite experience working with character play is I had a 6-year-old who we were doing a session with, and we modified a game called Super Normal, which is a superhero game, and he loved superheroes. So when he was engaging with the story, he wasn't engaging with it as I'm a small 6-year-old. He was engaging with it as I'm a superhero. I have power and agency in this circumstance. So kids who have highly active imaginations or are natural storytellers, I highly recommend using character play. Next, we have tactile play. Tactile play is great because it is fairly easy to understand and to practice, as well as it has a high age ceiling. So if you're able to tactily engage a child, so it gives them something that they can fidget with or work their hands with while talking to them, they often have an easier time communicating and speaking. Fun fact about tactile play, we all fall somewhere on a click to squish spectrum. So we either like tactile play with clicking things or squishing things. So if you're interested in creating tactile play spaces in your work, I highly recommend getting Play-Doh and then some fidget toys that can click. You can really do a lot of amazing things with those. And then next we have cooperative storytelling. So if you're able to create a story with a kid, or say like we're going to write a story about somebody going on a trip, it allows them to engage with their own stories without reliving them or re-experiencing them as themselves, but rather kind of giving advice to a fictional character or thinking about things from a bird's eye point of view, which is a different, often healthy way of working through those experiences. And then symbolic play is definitely kind of the most high conceptual form of play, but can be extremely helpful. So we're working with our mental health team right now to modify a form of play therapy called sand tray therapy, in which there is a set of plastic symbols. So for instance, cats, dogs, a house, trees, cars. And then you can ask the child, for instance, can you show me your journey here? Or can you show me where you lived? And they pull down the house and a character representing their father and then a cat. But it helps children express themselves non-verbally if they're engaging in symbol play, and is also engaging with different parts of the brain they would normally do in kind of a linear storytelling method. But is incredibly helpful, and again, has a very high age ceiling, so works with people well into their 20s. But to kind of close out how we've utilized different forms of play, any invitation to play is meaningful, and it doesn't necessarily need to fit into any of these categories. So I have had several conversations with kids go much better as soon as I take out a puppet, or I start inviting them to Mad Libs, or any kind of invitation to play communicates this is a safe space, this is judgment-free, you can say no, you have agency. Even if the kid says no, you've established a state of play, and that's a very meaningful thing. So we're going to do a deep dive now into my favorite form of play engagement, and definitely the most utilized here at the IRC, which is puppetry. So puppetry really is an amazing thing, especially as an LSP, where we have to ask a lot of questions, engage in a lot of difficult conversations with children. We originally designed the puppetry program at the IRC while working with Corey Rouse, who is a Muppeteer. So he does a lot of work with Jim Henson Studios, with Sesame Street. And I was explaining, I want to use puppets to have these conversations with kids. And he told me, oh, so you want to adapt the Rogers method for unaccompanied children. So it was literally Mr. Rogers who pioneered this method of using puppets to have meaningful conversations with children. And there's a special kind of magic that happens when we see a puppet. We know that it's a face, it's a person, it's got a background. But psychologically speaking, a child at a certain level understands that it's not real, right? Like this isn't a real pig or a cow or a frog that I'm talking to. It's felt in some buttons. So what happens is when a puppet is talking with a child about difficult experiences, the child isn't reliving them because on a certain level, they understand that this is a space of play. This is fictional. This isn't really real. So I have had children that wouldn't talk to me, talk to my puppet, tell them their backstory and tell them why they came to the United States. But it also allows children to make choices and challenge norms. Like goes back to that power and agency thing that we've talked about in the power imbalance, where children might be uncomfortable setting boundaries with me, Will Clements, the social worker, but with Javi the pig, they wouldn't. They feel comfortable making choices and having agency. So let's talk about how we can use puppets to talk to children. So I want everybody to say hi to Javi.
Hi, Javi.
All right, so this is Javi, my pig. He is my most utilized puppet. I bring him to my work and border shelters. He is great because he'll fit in a pocket. He's very transportable. I love these hands. You can do a lot of gestures with those. But we're going to talk through how exactly to create a puppet character that you can use with kids. So first piece of advice, create characters that children might have already engaged with in their lives. So for instance, Javi always plays the role of a child younger than the child I'm working with. So I was working with a 6-year-old a few weeks ago, so Javi is 4. And that gives Javi an excuse to ask a lot of questions, to be a little bit nosy, but also engage in kind of imaginative play and being silly. But you also might want to include other characters that these children might have run into. So a lot of my kids grew up with their grandparents being the primary care provider. So having kind of I do have kind of a grandfather turtle character that I will use with some of those kids, and they feel comfortable interacting and storytelling with him. Most of the characters we use are farm animals, really, because a lot of our kids grew up in rural areas with a lot of farm animals. So Javi is always younger. He always asks a lot of questions. He's a bit nosy. And it's very important to maintain separation between you and the puppet. So one of my favorite things to do is I'll be on a call with a kid and I'll say, I've got a friend who I think might help with this conversation. Is it okay if I bring him on? And then on a separate device, I will dial in Javi, who will be right there, and introduce him as a totally separate entity from me. And it is so funny what happens, because children will A, forget I'm there and just start talking to Javi, but B, I have had so many kids just start complaining about me to Javi. It's the funniest thing. But never make sure, if you can hide your puppet behind a desk and make sure that they can't see the hand kind of manipulating him, that's very important. And make sure that they never see the puppet in kind of a non-alive state. So when your hand is out of the puppet, they shouldn't be able to see it. Next piece of advice, mirror the children that you are working with. If they're very excited and high motion, bring that. Be silly, be energetic. If they're kind of sullen and downtrodden or don't want to talk, you can model that too. We're not trying to engage with them always at kind of a high energy, hyper animal from the Muppets kind of level. We can meet them where they are. And then finally, create some sympathetic movements. If you're able to have any kind of puppet, figure out a way that makes them feel alive, like have a listening pose. So Javi tilts his head a lot. He scratches his ears. And when he's talking a lot, he'll take a breath and just go during the middle of his speech, but do little things to make it seem alive or make it seem like a quirky character. We're not going for realism. We're just going for things that make it seem like it's moving and it's a real thing. So finally, choose characters that you feel comfortable using. So originally I had a dragon puppet that I was using with kids, and that voice was down here. But after 6 hours working at a border shelter, that voice gets kind of exhausting to do. So Javi is just my voice dialed up an octave or two. Choose characters that you feel comfortable with. You're not going through an elaborate performance. This doesn't need to be anything extraordinary. It just needs to be an open and creative space. So that's how we use puppets.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Will. So I'm now going to talk a little bit about ways that we can actually empower children through different types of communication and trust building. And specifically talking about our Unaccompanied program, we officially launched in March of 2022. We had a pilot program the latter part of 2021, and to date, we've received over 300 direct contacts with either children, some who have been anywhere from 1-year-old when we've talked to their sponsor all the way through to 17, 18, 19-year-olds. So it really does run the gamut. One of the unique things about our program is that we focus on helping unaccompanied children nationally. So although we're based in Dallas, we are able to help children all across the country. We are able to serve any child that has been designated at any point as an unaccompanied child. So that really allows us flexibility in terms of the kinds of support and the kinds of wraparound services that we're able to provide for children. Oftentimes, and I'll be talking about this a little bit more detail in a few slides, oftentimes if children move, if there are other circumstances where a program may be limited because of age, we're able to step in and fill that gap. One of the key things that we're able to provide, because we know how incredibly important it is, and I know you guys understand that very well, is being able to provide legal service referrals and being able to provide wraparound support. So one of the key pieces that we're using in our program is being able to engage with digital community liaisons. So these liaisons are placed all across the country, and they are the ones that are speaking directly to our unaccompanied children. They're able to provide in-person assistance. They are based at our IRC offices, and I'll be showing you a map in just a second. And they're also able to communicate remotely with our kids on platforms that they already use. So in being able to maintain this two-way communication with either the child, depending on the age, or the sponsor, this is a way for them to feel that they have support and that they're able to ask questions in a space that is both safe and where they can get trusted resources. So one of the things that our community liaisons do is they build trust over time because they are engaging on platforms that both sponsors and unaccompanied kids are very comfortable with already. So they're able to connect with us on WhatsApp, on Facebook, and on Facebook Messenger, and on our website. So this allows them to be able to ask questions. Oftentimes, one of the questions we get the most is how do they check to see if they have a hearing? So we're able to provide them with resources related to the EOIR hotline and on the website. So they're able to answer questions in a way that's very clear and very accessible. We really try to ensure that the language that we use is always friendly and informative. We always encourage our kids to ask us additional questions. We are always checking up and seeing how they're doing. If we provide a resource or a referral, we will often check back in a few weeks and ask them, did you get all of the information that you needed? Are there other things that we might be able to help you with? And our community liaisons are able to provide responses within 24 to 48 hours. And we have DCLs who are available in English, Spanish, and Dari, and we have interpreters available for all other languages. So whether a child speaks a Mayan language, Portuguese, or other languages, we're also able to provide that support. So this is our current model. So you'll see we have, and we're currently hiring additional DCLs. We currently have 2 DCLs based in Texas. We are currently going to be hiring DCLs in Miami, Florida, in Washington, and in Phoenix, Arizona. So this is something that we think is particularly important because we want our children and our sponsors to feel comfortable whether they're going into an IRC office or whether we have social service providers or legal service providers reaching out for us to be able to establish those partnerships and for the children to be able to connect with us in whatever way they feel comfortable, whether it's in person or whether it's online. And so how can children connect with us? This is our website. We actually have widgets that make it very easy for children to be able to just click right on our homepage and be able to connect via WhatsApp. So text messages through WhatsApp. We also have audio features where they're able to send us voice notes. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, our WhatsApp number and our Facebook page. So we are making it as easy as possible for children and sponsors and legal service providers to connect with us and ask any questions or other information. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about our two-way communication model because this is something that's integral and it's something that is quite different from other service providers. So one of the things that we do when children reach out to us, they're able to ask questions in a wide variety of ways. They can either message us directly, they can call us, they can send us private messages through Facebook, or they can send us voice notes. So this really provides children with a lot of flexibility in terms of being able to ask questions in ways that they feel both comfortable, and it allows them, if they have follow-up questions, for them to also be able to engage in whatever way is easiest for them. And this we feel is particularly important when you have children with differing needs in terms of language ability and just comfort level. So that's something that we are always very cognizant of. Our digital liaisons will always reply with personalized messages. So we will include the child's name, and especially if there's a referral from another organization or from within IRC, we'll make sure that we include the name of the case manager or the caseworker that's working with them. We always include an accessible and friendly tone, and we love to use emojis because we know that that's something that really encourages children to feel that they're really talking to someone who is a peer and who is someone that they can trust. As I mentioned earlier, it's incredibly important for us to be able to stay in touch and be able to build that trust over time. Oftentimes, when children are reaching out to us and they find out when they have their court hearings, we are now having kids that are being scheduled into 2014 and 2015. So it's an incredibly long time before they're going to actually be able to be in front of an IJ. So for us, it's really critical that we're able to stay in touch with them and we're ensuring that they're in the right space for them to be able to both find an attorney, being able to go to their court hearings and have that additional wraparound support. And we really try to meet the children and the sponsors where they are. So if they just ask a question like, I need help getting enrollment in school, or I would like help finding an ESL class that's nearby, that's the information that we will provide, but then we will always follow up and inquire and say these are some additional things that you might be able to benefit from. So even if they're not interested in, at that moment, finding an attorney or talking about their immigration case, this is why it's important for us to be able to follow up, because we know that as we continue to engage with them, oftentimes both children and sponsors will open up to us and will then be able to ask for those additional resources and support that they need. The other thing that's really critical in terms of our two-way communication model is that we're not only providing information, but we're engaging with the children in a way where we're able to adapt and create new resources and new articles on our website based off of questions that they have. So two examples that I can provide is we had several questions come up a few months ago from children who had aged out. So they had turned 18 and they didn't realize that they were also going to have to go to ICE check-ins in addition to their court hearings. So we were able to develop a full article that provided them with information about what that process was like. And with our Afghan unaccompanied minors, we've also developed a page now that focuses specifically on some of the key questions that they have and what are some of the legal options that they may have and why it's important for them to connect with an attorney. So these are just two examples of ways that we're continuing to adapt and include new resources based off of the things that we're hearing on the ground. So what are some of the key needs that we're finding, some of the key concerns? Most of our children that have reached out to us or that we've gotten referrals from, I would say 80 to 85% are looking for legal service providers. And we know that many LSPs are at or over capacity. So this is something that we're really focused on trying to find different ways to collaborate. So working directly through our Vera providers and also other nonprofit organizations, being able to collaborate with statewide organizations and collaboratives to be able to provide referrals is really a key thing that we are continuing to strengthen as we continue to grow. The other thing that we're finding is a lot of children that are aging out no longer have access to certain services. So they're a particularly vulnerable population, and it's something that we're able to provide support for children that have aged out, and especially if they have children of their own. We're currently working with three unaccompanied children who have kids as young as 1 year old themselves. So being able to ensure that they're able to meet the needs of their own children, but then also making sure that they're able to do what they need to do with their own legal case is incredibly important. We are also working very closely with our post-release services program. Our post-release services program provides a lot of wraparound support, which is incredibly helpful for children, but only a very small percentage of them are actually able to qualify for PRS. And PRS is only available for 90 days. So after that 90-day period, we will often get those referrals so that the children can continue to receive some additional support. And the kind of wraparound referrals that we provide is quite broad. We try to be as holistic as possible so we can provide assistance with getting access to referrals for medical care, dental care, education, as I said, getting access to how to enroll. Sponsors often call to ask how to enroll their kids in school, basic needs, so food security, housing, transportation is becoming a huge issue, as well as accompaniment for children who don't or who can't at the moment have access to an attorney. Being able to have access to accompaniment is also a key resource, and many other things as well. I did want to spend a little bit of time also talking about our Afghan unaccompanied children, our Afghan minors, and these are children that are both assured and still not assured. We're finding that there is a huge need still to be able to connect these kids with organizations for them to be able to apply for APA, so the Afghan Placement Assistance Program, and the virtual option. So this is something that we are continuing to connect within IRC and with other organizations that now are slowly starting to have more capacity. We strongly encourage you that if you are working with any Afghan minors, that is something that we know a lot of kids were not able to early on apply for APA. So being able to do that now is really important. And also having access to an attorney for a consultation so that they can really assess what their options are. A lot of the kids that we are connecting with now only have humanitarian parole for 2 years. So being able to talk to an attorney so that they're able to understand how they may be able to qualify for a longer permanent status is something that a lot of children are really concerned about. And the last piece is around updates related to family reunification. Many of the kids are here with sponsors, but some of them have family that are still back in Afghanistan. So this is something else that we are working very closely with our working group to be able to provide them with some additional information about how they may be able to potentially bring some of their family members here to the US. So now that we've talked a little bit about what some of the concerns and what some of the needs are, I wanted to shift now and talk about some of the resources that we've actually created to address some of these needs. One of the things that we've done, and I talked about this a little earlier, is the EOIR hotline and the portal that's online. There's a wonderful resource from ASAP that I know I've used for many, many years when I was working with our families that were separated because of the Trump administration. But this is a resource that was really geared towards adults. So what we found is for our children, because most of them are boys and girls who are 14 to 17 years old. I would say we have about 70 to 80% fall within that age group. We wanted to ensure that that content was streamlined. We didn't want it to be very text heavy. We wanted to ensure that the language was simple and accessible because we knew that a lot of kids were going to be getting this information through WhatsApp and through Facebook. So we wanted it to be really easy to read. We wanted to be able to update the instructions so there was a very clear flow of steps, what they needed to do in order to be able to check their case. And we wanted to include more graphics and images and using colors that were more inviting and lighter. We also added a phone and internet option because we know that a lot of kids really are more comfortable using their phone. So being able to provide both of those options was something that was really important for us. And also we created a PDF and an image, a JPEG version so that it was easy to share. So this is the example. So the original version from ASAP and then our version, which as you can see, it really is much more accessible for the children that we're working with. We're continuing to create new resources, but this is one that we found does make it a lot easier for kids to follow along. The steps are all in Spanish. Everything is really made thinking about what would make it easy for a child to be able to follow along. The other resource that we've changed and we've created is our change of address form. So this is something that we found several months ago. The government had provided an option for a change of address online, which is something that is really helpful and accessible for kids. But we found that they were still having trouble because some of the steps are confusing. It is easier for them to access the form online, but we did find that they needed some more instructions. We were not able to find instructions in Spanish. And when we did suggest the online, the paper version, they would often struggle with needing to print it out. Oftentimes they don't have access to a printer. So being able to provide a resource that was in Spanish and that was a video that would be able to step by step allow them to understand the steps that they needed was something that was really important for us. We really wanted to make sure that this was also addressing language justice and making it accessible for children. So even if they couldn't understand the Spanish version, there could be subtitles and there would be other ways for them to be able to engage with the characters in a way that was really inviting for them, and that the instructions would be able to be repeated in a way that was really simple for them. So a lot of times kids may not necessarily want to look at a whole list of steps, but being able to have them look at a video and be able to have that be an option for them is something that we knew was going to be important. So I just want to make sure before I show the video to be able to just share my sound. And so this is a preview of the video that we created.
Hola, en este video vamos a enseñarte cómo cambiar tu dirección en la Corte de Inmigración si tú ya tienes una audiencia o cita programada con el juez de inmigración. Es muy importante que si te cambias de casa, que le dejes saber a la corte y al fiscal. Tú les debes dejar saber de tu nueva dirección o teléfono, ¿sí? Al salir del albergue, la notificación de comparecencia, o NTA por sus siglas en inglés, tiene el lugar de tu corte en otro estado, no en donde tú vas a vivir. Si te mudas de casa en la misma ciudad, o si te cambias de ciudad o estado. Para hacer este cambio es muy fácil. Solo debes llenar el formulario EOIR 33 en línea o en tu teléfono. Ahora vamos a usar información ficticia para explicarte paso por paso cómo hacer esto.
Okay, So I'm going to stop it there just because I want to make sure we get to the rest of the slides. But I'll this is also available on YouTube, so I'll be putting a link in the chat if you'd like to see the rest of this intro. And we are finalizing the video and then getting it approved by Vera, so we'll be able to share that resource with you in hopefully just about a month or so. So some of the other resources that we've created, we actually have a Know Your Rights infographic that we are encouraging everyone to include in your packets. This is something that for Vera legal service providers, it's actually listed on page 6 of the instructions that you've received. This infographic has been approved by Vera for use by us and by all legal service providers. We also have a tailored infographic for our unaccompanied minors from Afghanistan, and that has been translated into Dari and Pashto. So that's also a resource that we highly encourage you to use. Our original infographic is available in 21 languages, and we are also adding some new languages for this new year. So I'll also be sharing a link that's in the resources page at the end of the PowerPoint presentation. We've also created a sponsor flyer because we found that oftentimes, especially when children are younger, they're receiving a lot of information in the Know Your Rights packet. So we want to make sure that sponsors are able to see and know that we are a resource, and for them to understand how to reach out to us and what are some of the major services we're able to provide. This flyer is currently being approved by Vera, so it's not available for dissemination quite yet, but it is available in English and Spanish, and we are also going to be translating it into a few other languages. But I did want to share what these look like. So these are our Know Your Rights infographics in English and Spanish and in Dari. So these tell the children the importance of finding an attorney, how to check their case in EOIR, why they should fill out a change of address or change of venue form, and how they can get access to local resources. These are all of the things that we're able to provide through Unaccompanied. So again, this is something that we strongly encourage you to be able to include in your own packets when you're talking to kids, or if you're just talking to kids, and this is something that you'd like to include as an additional option, please feel free to do that as well. And this is our sponsor flyer, again, in English and in Spanish. We really tried to make it something that was both accessible for our sponsors and something that could really be printed out and you put somewhere where it would be visible, and it could be something that even if at the moment they may not necessarily reach out to us, that they know that we're a resource for them at any point. And then lastly, I wanted to just take a couple of minutes for us to talk about how we can continue to collaborate with everyone that's here. We know that one of the really important things for all of us is finding ways to increase capacity for legal representation. So as I mentioned earlier, we're continuing to build partnerships, and we would love to be able to collaborate with other nonprofit providers and private attorneys, because we know, particularly in Texas and other states, it's incredibly difficult for our kids to even get a consult, much less get some of their cases placed. Many of our kids are waiting 3, 4, 5 months, oftentimes before they get a consultation. We're also looking to share and disseminate new resources. So many of our Unaccompanied resources are going to be disseminated through the Vera listserv and on our website. So please look out for that. We're also really excited to be able to create new infographics and new videos and new resources based off of suggestions from our kids, as I mentioned earlier, but also suggestions from you. If you see that there is a need for a specific resource, you don't have to feel like it's something you necessarily need to develop. This is something that we would love to be able to collaborate, and for us to be able to talk about what would be the best way to be able to get that information out to both kids and sponsors. So know that we are a resource in that regard as well, for us to be able to develop these new materials. And lastly, around providing wraparound support referrals. We know that oftentimes when kids are struggling, whether it's with housing insecurity, with food insecurity, if they're having trouble in school, it really makes it that much more difficult for them to be able to focus on their legal case. So if you're working with a child that may not necessarily have access to a social worker or may not have a caseworker that can provide that wraparound support, know that we can also be that resource where you can provide a referral and we would be able to look and see where the child is located and then being able to connect them with an organization that would be able to assist. And in your resource packet for this presentation, we do have a flyer that we've included specifically for legal service providers so that you have our contact information and you're able to provide those referrals. So these are just a few of the ways that we would love to be able to collaborate and continue to connect with all of you because we really know that this really has to be a collaborative effort. There are so many needs that our kids have, and we really want to empower them with the information that they deserve so that they're able to make the best decisions for themselves, both in terms of their immigration case and also for them to be able to acclimate in the best way possible as they continue to live here in the US. And these are some links that Will and I have put together, both in terms of play and some background information on the Lego Foundation, Dr. Stuart Brown that Will mentioned earlier, our Importa Me website, and a link to the Know Your Rights infographics that I mentioned earlier. So we do have a few minutes if we'd like to answer any questions, feel free to put them in the chat.
There are a few questions that have come up already. So I think the first one is for Will. Can you expand a little on cooperative storytelling? Is this encouraging them to tell the story of someone else rather than their own direct story?
Yeah, so great question. Cooperative storytelling in the context of an LSP would really be about trying to get them to engage with their story outside of themselves, right? So writing a story about somebody else with their attorney, I think will be a super helpful way for the attorney to get some insight into, for instance, what their journey with the United States was like. So prepping a story about somebody who has to make a big trip or do like a fair amount of traveling on foot or anything like that would be extremely helpful. But it's about getting them to engage with their story outside of themselves. So definitely not their story, someone else's.
Okay. So I guess kind of following up on that a little bit is the question, so how does this translate into getting the information you need for an asylum declaration, for example?
Yeah, so it varies from form to form, right? So with a puppet, it would be literally, I use Javi to conduct an intake. He would ask the direct questions that need to be asked. With kids who, for instance, have difficulty telling their story in a linear verbal fashion, using symbol play or art so that a kid can draw their story is an easier way to communicate that. Or even if it is creating a safe space where a child feels comfortable, something like tactile play can make it much easier for them to communicate. So a lot of these can directly kind of influence the way you ask questions. A lot of them run tangentially long.
Awesome. And so another question would be, are there kind of specific age ranges that you generally use with kind of the different types of play?
Yeah, so I think there are a few with no age ceiling. So symbolic play and tactile play definitely have no age ceiling. Puppetry, I wouldn't try to do with one of my teenagers. I think that kind of stops at age 11. And then, but most of these have pretty high age ceilings, like art, tactile play, cooperative storytelling has a high age ceiling, but yeah, it definitely varies. Use your own judgment.
Awesome. And then there's another question, I think for Amari. So it says, so the children and or sponsors can both text and or talk with DCLs.
Correct, yes. And we often, when children are younger, we've had children as young as 1-year-old, 5 years old. We've had their sponsors reach out to us. So we will ask the child very, very basic questions initially. So just their name, getting them comfortable, and then we will have the digital community liaison, the DCL, speak to the sponsor and get the more specific details, especially when they need a legal service referral or if they need other wraparound support. But we always engage first with the child and then with the sponsor.
Great. And I think in your previous slide, you showed where we can get the infographics. And I think we are going to share these slides. And then I think that the other question that I found was, where exactly is Importami based?
So our office is based in Dallas, but we are going to have, as I mentioned on the map, we are going to have our liaisons based at IRC offices in Miami, in Phoenix, in Dallas, and in Seattle. So we're in the process of making sure that everyone is based there, but we are a national program. So literally people can contact us from anywhere across the country.
Awesome. So I think there's just a couple questions. The COA video you said is on YouTube, I think?
Yes. So the introduction, I'll go ahead and I'll pop the link in now. That is for just the introductory piece. We're still adding in the steps and we need to have it approved by Vera. But once that's done, we will be happy to put the full version with all of the steps. That'll be disseminated through the listserv and also on our website.
Great.
So we'll be able to share that once it's been finalized.
Awesome. I think we have 1 minute left. If there's anybody that has additional questions, this is such an amazing presentation. Thank you so much.
Go ahead. I just put that YouTube link there so you guys can see that.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. It's been such a pleasure.
Yeah.
Looking forward to hear from many of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys so much. Such a great presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.